Hi everyone, welcome back to ARMYverse. We are here with a special collaborative project today, and we have all three of our lovely hosts here, including myself and that lovely trio. So yeah, we are having a very special one. Me and Yami from Army Time, and we have Amer from Everything Goes. We actually spoke on the Army Time podcast, if you didn't see it, in our recap this week about Break the Silence, but we decided that we had way too many thoughts on the series that we would never be able to fit it into our small segment. So we decided to all come together as three armies to discuss Break the Silence. And if you have never been with us before, if this is your first time coming across our channel, we are a channel for ARMY, and we are ARMY ourselves, and we like to make content as a group kind of community thing that we get to talk about things, play fun games, have rants, all the above. If you want to check out more, then you can go to our channel. But this specific series will be us talking about every episode of Break the Silence in detail. We have all sat and made many notes on this topic, so you can expect us to freak out and talk about everything and get soppy and all of the above. So consider this your way of talking with friends about Break the Silence. Now, if we just introduce ourselves, my name is Billy, and we have Yami. Please say hello.
Hi guys, I'm Yami. I'm one of the co-hosts of Army Time.
And we have Amer. Please say hello.
Hi everyone, I'm Omer. I'm the host of the Everything Goes podcast here on the channel.
So yeah, I think that's about everything that we need for introductions, and let's move on to talk about the first episode of Break the Silence.
Woo! Alrighty, so before we go into the episode, I wanted to set the stage and kind of give some context for what exactly was going on in the world of BTS before they started this episode. So this episode begins with the beginning of the Asia leg of the Love Yourself tour in November 2018. The Asia leg of their tour consisted of a Japan dome tour with stops in Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, and Fukuoka. And then interspersed between all of the Japan concerts, they had also concerts in Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Bangkok. So prior to this Asia leg, they had actually spent the last several months traveling the world in the US and Canada and Europe for the North America and Europe legs of the tour. The Love Yourself tour concert actually began in Seoul on August 25th in 2018. Then September 5th through October 6th, they were in the US. Then October 9th through October 20th, they were in Europe. And then the Asia leg of the tour in Tokyo began in November 13th. So essentially they had month after month after month of nonstop appearances in concerts, inside performances, in interviews, appearances on TV shows. BTS were everywhere. And so that is where we meet up with them in the beginning of episode 1. So Omer, if you want to give us an overview of the episode, we'll jump right in after that and have us a nice big discussion.
Yeah. So basically, every episode has a current theme going through it, and this first episode centered around companionship and how the team members basically relate to one another, how they handle each other's differences, the problems they face. And this episode really showcased their amazing bond between each other.
Yeah, just to add to that, so the title of this episode was Still Going On Together. So that about sums up what you just said there, Emma.
Yeah, we know from previous interviews that 2018, the start of 2018 and 2017 were very hard years for BTS because they had a lot of big changes going. They're skyrocketed to stardom and the world started taking notice. They had not just the Love Yourself tour, but also the Wings tour was very, very demanding on them. And it took a lot of mental capabilities to handle all of that. And that really took a toll. And the fact that they decided to still go strong, to still keep going, to sign for a 7-year contract really embodied part of the tour.
When did they sign? Was it like sometime like September, October 2018?
Yeah, right at the
Yeah.
start of the tour, it was announced that they signed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
So here's my take on it. We know that the Wings tour was their first global tour with stops in the US and in South America. And it was like they had never expected to be that popular. They had never expected to have that kind of explosive growth. 2017, in my personal opinion, is the year that they broke into the US music market for real and started to become a more just a bigger fixture in pop culture. And so they had this phenomenal tour, and then at the end of the year, I think that they were just wondering, like, do we keep going? Is this a good place to stop, to finish when we're high? And I think we partially even had these discussions when after watching Bang Bang Con, where they had their Wings tour finale, right, the final, and it just seemed like that was a good place for them to end. They felt like they had accomplished everything they set out to do.
Well, when you look at it, it's very much that for most groups that had been in their position, those that had come before them, that was it. That was the apex of success, was reaching the point they had reached during the Wings tour. No other group from their background had ever made it further than that, really. And so it's totally understandable why they would think that. And then I've got this in my notes for later because they talk about it a lot, but I agree. I think that 2018 really was a point when they really had to take a deep look inside themselves and say, do we still want to do this? And I'm sure they probably swung from one side to the other very regularly of, no, I don't want to yes, I do want to. And they talk about it a lot here, but I think that 2018 was such a significant year for them in developing their identity and their path. And
yeah, and if you think about it, you know, we'll get into this a little bit later, but they talked about how they had struggles in the beginning of 2018. So this would have been after the Wings tour, before they had just dropped Love Yourself Her in like what, September, October 2017, something like that. And then so this is them in the beginning of 2018. They talked about how they had all these struggles and everything was so hard for them and they were really conflicted about whether they could keep going or not. And then they dropped Love Yourself Tear in May of 2018, and that is the first time they have a #1 album on the Billboard 200 charts.
Can you imagine their relief, or not even relief, just their
shock,
happiness that they made that decision to keep going, because it paid off. Like, they struggled so much with it and they made so many harsh decisions and they took the leap of faith into the abyss of the unknown that nobody had ever been before, and it paid off. Like, I can't even imagine the feeling that they would have got. And I think that feeling is what really changed their mentalities. When you look at them before that point and when you look at them after that point, their perspective on goals, on life, on dreams, all of it changed. And we will go on to talk about this because Hobie says something like, 2018 was the year I achieved my dreams. And it's true. They achieved everything they ever thought would be possible. And then it was a point of, well, what comes next? And that thought itself is so scary. But the fact that they took it on is just admirable. And I'm so happy that it worked out so well.
Yeah. And you know what happens after that? In August, they drop Love Yourself Answer. And that is their second #1 debut on Billboard 200. So it was, I think, proof to them that they weren't a one-trick pony, that they had grown their audience, their fans, and that it wasn't just like a sensation that went away. No, the fans were here to stay. Their support was here to stay.
Yeah. I think first off, both albums would have still come out even if they wouldn't extend the contract, because the contract, the old Love Yourself era was still part of the old contract. But it's still amazing to see that growth and how stable they are as artists. Like, you can trust every album preceded the one before it with pre-sales and stuff. And the growth of the fandom throughout this short time is really amazing. And that can only happen when you're a solid artist. And I want to stress about the Wings tour that, again, we saw in Bang Bang Con, like you said, the difference between the Wings tour and the Love Yourself tour is unbelievable, because in the Wings tour, everything was so strict. they didn't, the amount of smiles, the amount of fun they had on stage, the how it was all spaced out. Like they had in the Wings tour all the solos as one part, and then almost, and then like the group songs before and after, but it wasn't distributed properly, and they were wearing themselves out. And you could see how hard and how much of a toll that tour took on them. And then, as opposed to that, the Love Yourself tour, when they can have fun on stage and they can bounce around and smile and break a little bit of that very strict set list that they have. So you can see their growth both as artists and performers during that era.
And I think it all comes back down to their mentality. I've said it a few times now, but I think the Love Yourself era and the tour as a whole was so healing for them. And their whole mentality just changed so much. And it's so beautiful to see when you look at, like, we won't get into this spoiler, we'll talk about it in another episode, but you just see it so much throughout this whole series of how different their perspectives were. Anyway, let us get started on the episode.
So the final thing that I wanted to say is that the concerts for Asia, for the Asia leg of the tour, were not really announced at the same time as US and Europe concerts. They got added later. And when they were added, the venues were all domes. So in Japan, domes are like indoor stadiums. And all the other non-Japan locations were also like national stadiums, these huge locations. So after having spent several months going across the US and Europe in these big arenas, it was like somewhere midway through that they announced the locations for Asia, and all of them were stadiums. So this was them like ramping up their concerts. So when we see them in the opening of this episode, this is them saying like, wow, like we are finally having this massive tour in Asia, which for any other artist in Asia would have seemed like the peak of what they could do, like this big massive Asian stadium tour. And for them, this was just the middle leg between the arena tour they had done in US and Europe and then the stadium tour that they do in US and Europe afterwards.
Yeah, like they didn't have to stop after that point. That wasn't the finale. It was just a gateway onto the next bigger thing. And if that doesn't define BTS, then nothing does.
Mm-hmm.
They just keep going.
I really expected the tour to start with I expected the docuseries to start with the Speak Yourself tour. And it really took me by surprise that it started in November 2018 in Tokyo. And I think it's exactly what you said. It's because that point is usually the high point of every Asian artist. And for BTS, it was just the middle of the story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So on that point, the episode opens with Jimin being asked a question about companionship that he doesn't really know how to answer. And then it transitions to the members discussing their thoughts as they embark on the, Asian leg of the tour. So we get two big quotes from Yoongi and Namjoon. Do you guys want to say what they are?
Before you go fully into it, I just wanted to say this like beginning segment, I think, is really worthy of like just analysis in general. The kind of first 5 minutes of it, the way they shot it and the way it was in black and white and how it began and ended with Jimin, and then how it kind of showed little snippets of everything. It felt very much like it was the docuseries condensed into 5 minutes. And I love the way they did that. They edited it so beautifully. Yes. So we had, like, I kind of wrote it down here. We had Jimin, who was confused about the question. He said something like, I'm not sure if I exactly, and then he sneezes and says, understood the question, and then he laughs. And that sets the whole tone for this docuseries. And then what comes next is you get the stage shots, the shots of them touring, and then you get a few really beautiful quotes from them. And then you also get some silly moments of like Tae conducting the orchestra in his mind with his toothbrush, and them fake boxing and things like that. And then you have a brief overview of the structure. So they show all of the locations that it would be. And then after that, they have a few more things which we'll probably go into detail, but they end it again with Jimin ending his thoughts on it. And he says, okay, I'll try to think about that a bit more. And isn't that just beautiful, the structure of it? So it's kind of like, I don't really know what the hell I'm doing. I'm just having fun and working my fucking ass off. But you know what? I'm going to think about it and I'll get back to you on that. And that sets up the entire docuseries to be exactly what it is. It's BTS in their element as performers, incredible talents, but funny, down to earth, humble human beings. And honestly, that 5-minute clip is everything. And I adored it so much. And I love that they did it in black and white. And it just, I loved it.
Yeah.
First time I watched the episode, I watched those first 5 minutes 6 times. I'm not exaggeration. I didn't finish the episode. I was like, no, I have to say this again. Wait, the Kim line is doing something funny. No, I have to say this again. No, Tay is conducting. No, I watched it 6 times the first time it came out. And
the cinematography is phenomenal. They did such a good job. They were whoever they got, or if it's just whoever they always had who approved, they've spent a lot of time trying to convey what the contents are of this docuseries in a way where you can understand, like, the black and white interview scenes are them being honest. Well, you're not supposed to focus on the person. You're supposed to focus on what they're saying. And then when they're on stage, everything is bright, dynamic, phenomenal. You get caught up in it and you go, yeah, this is where they come to life. This is where they love being. It's like candy. There's so many colors, explosions, fans cheering. And that's what they spend the whole episode talking about, that they do this for the fans. The fans give them energy. And you as the viewer get energy as you watch it.
Yeah, and you know what I love that they included here? They had Jin saying about how his ears turn red when he's the center of attention. And I love that they put this here because it's literally showing, like, yeah, we do all this and we have all of these things, but you know what? My ears turn red when people look at me because I'm a human being. Like, do you know what I mean? And then actually, when you think about it, the other one we had is June, and he says, if you ask them about the meaning of their existence, that will scare them.
They'll be like, what is existence? I love that line because that was one of the first 2 quotes I wanted to talk about, that I assumed the interviewer asked him, like, what is your existence? What is the meaning of your existence as BTS? And he just interrupts the interviewer and he's like, if you ask them that will scare them. Like, he's in leader mode and he knows his friends. He's just like, that will freak them out.
I literally wrote down in capital letters, leader material.
and like he asked Jimin, instead of existence, companionship, and Jimin's like, yeah, I'll get back to you on that.
He basically said, what is companionship? I have to think about it.
And I just think that having them talk about this all really just makes you go into their world. And it's like, you know, there's nothing fancy, there's nothing big and profound about this. This is just us. This is just us as human beings who happen to go out on stage every night to thousands of people and feel like superheroes. But that's why
I think they showed it that way. The cinematography reflects their perception of what they do as well. They're like, I'm just a regular guy. Here's my thoughts and feelings and experiences as I've done this over so many years. When I go on stage, I am in a magical place. But that's on stage. That's something else than who I normally am.
And that's why this whole beginning sequence is just perfect, because it just reflects their world so well. And props.
It really does.
The other quote that I wanted to talk about is Yoongi. When he gets asked, like, what is the most important thing on tour? And he says, the most important thing on tour is your state of mind. You can change an F1's car engine, but you can't do that here. And the way I interpreted that is, you know, he's obviously referring to like a race car track where like you have cars that race around in a circle on a track. And if you have a problem with your engine, you can pull over to your pit and have your team change the engine of your car or whatever the hell's wrong with your car so that you can keep going. But if there's like a specific place on the track where you can do that. When you're in the middle of things, when you're going, when you're racing, you can't just like at 90 miles an hour have someone open the hood of your car and change out the engine. And that's what I think he was referring to here. They are going 90 miles an hour at that moment. He's like, whatever you have is what you have. You have to deal with it.
And you know, the other thing that I wanted to point out about that quote is when it comes to human beings, like when the engine dies, it dies. There's no replacing it. You get one. So the main thing about being on tour is taking care of yourself internally, because if you as an individual break down, then that's it. And without you as an individual, then everything else collapses around you. And it is the perfect way of looking at it. And I'm sure that their company go to very large extent to make sure that their inner engines are always running and there's no chance of it breaking down.
especially when if one breaks down, it affects the whole team. It's not just one.
Yeah. Okay, so after those quotes, we transition into their first concert stop in Tokyo. They had 2 concert days in Tokyo. So it opens with a scene of them under the stage, coming back to the dressing room to change or prepare for the next segment of the concert. And you have Hobie, who discusses the meaning of them performing in Japan, presumably the meaning of them performing on a dome tour and a stadium tour in Asia, and how he dreamed of being able to perform there as a Korean artist. And then he trolls ARMY by waiting, because he's like at the very, very top of the venue on like the top stands, and he's just like making hearts and like waving at ARMYs as they fill in their seats down below and laughing at the
Do you know what I loved so much about that? It's like he's watching all the ARMYs enter and he makes a joke about it and he's like, you can't see me and I'm right here. But then like his first instinct is just to start throwing hearts at them. Like even though nobody can see it. It's adorable and I thought it was so sweet.
I agree.
I think about the dome tour. It's not just the dome stadium in Japan is very, very special. It's very big. It's something most Asian artists dream to perform there. It's like it's their final dream. It's their ultimate dream to perform in places like the dome stadium.
And just to emphasize that, Japan is the 2nd largest music market in the world. If you are a Korean artist, a Chinese artist, a Philippines artist, anyone on that side of the world, you want to crack into the 2nd largest music market in the world. Like Japan is the ultimate place for you to be a popular artist.
Yeah. It really is. And the thing is that this tour was in November 2018. It was just after a lot of drama. This leg started, and it happened partially because of this tour, because they were supposed to do an interview with a TV show right before this tour started. And this moment is so monumental that the fact that it didn't damage them a bit, that the people still came, the ARMY still came, everyone showed up, the dome was fully booked, everyone was there, and they did it for 2 nights. And that's not something trivial. It's something huge. It's something, again, most artists dream of doing and can't.
And they overcame the controversial crap that got thrown their way and still successfully performed.
I think it just shows the love and the trust that flows between BTS and ARMY, and I really think that having that be the start of this next leg of the tour would have been just a perfect way to like shake your head, get yourself back up and keep going. And yeah, I love that. So I think the next thing that happens is Yoongi. Is it Yoongi who talks about...
No, the next thing is Namjoon. Namjoon gets asked if BTS performing in Japan symbolizes anything, and he says he deflects. He says it's not about BTS in particular performing, that this is something that all artists would dream of being able to do. And then there's like a scene of them with their ending comments during the concert with them speaking in Japanese. I think, in my opinion, that was included to showcase the fact that they have taken pains to hone their foreign language abilities to speak Japanese and give entire comments in Japanese during the concert. And then it goes into Yoongi.
Yeah, so we have Yoongi talking about performing and how he doesn't really have nervous energy or anxiety about performing anymore. But the thing that I loved that he did was that he said that having this change of perspective doesn't mean that I'm not taking it seriously. And if anything, it actually means that I'm taking it more seriously because I'm not letting my emotions control my work. And he describes it as a sporting event of if the players go onto the field and their like heart is racing and they're sweating, then they're not going to be able to perform to the best of their ability. And so the way that he has developed and has become with experience is actually enabling them, and I'm sure him and the rest of them, to be able to perform better. And I always wonder about that, because I reckon once you keep doing things long enough, then you end up just building up this kind of normality of it. And it's such a great way of approaching it, of just, this is normality, but I can embrace that and make it the best that I possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what? I think they get this from Bang PD Nim, because he has always said that you need to practice, 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 practice. That is the only way you get better. You practice until your performance is ingrained in your muscles, in your soul, and you do it automatically. Only then can you perform at a level beyond that, because your body will automatically do it, and you can be outside of the moment looking at yourself, trying to think of how you can improve it even beyond that.
You know, I agree. I think it's the perfect way of being able to appreciate it as well. Because if you're going on stage and you're constantly anxious and you're nervous, then you're kind of very internal. You're very much in your mind and you're not able to live it almost. But once you've got to that point where it just becomes second nature, then you're free to use your emotions and your brain and your eyes and whatever else that you have to fully experience the moment.
Yeah, I think you become also a lot more animated. Like, it's hard, it's very not the same scale in any way, shape, or form. But I do a lot of conferences all over the world, and I have to like travel and present my work. And the first few times were terrifying, and I was shaking, and I stumbled all the time, and I skipped stuff, and I would beat myself up for it later. And if someone asked me a question, I was completely frozen. And with time and practice, it becomes you're able to project the exact same stuff, but you make it more animated and lively, and you can engage with your audience. And you really see that with BTS, how they grow throughout time, how they're able to engage and play around and lighten everything up. And you also see it with all of them, like if they make a mistake, they're able to handle it a lot better. And so I think like really practice is something that's vital in this situation. It really allows you to grow as a performer.
Practice makes perfect.
Yes.
They say.
So then we move on, and the concert has ended. They're backstage. They do their today's Bangtan photo of them after every concert. And actually they make comments about how they like to collect those photos, which I find adorable. I wonder if they have like a photo album or a gallery of that somewhere, of just like how they've changed over the years after these concerts. And if they do, I would like a copy. I know we have all of these photos. Maybe one ARMY somewhere has already collected all of them and can just give us like a digital photo album to look through. I would love to see that.
It would be like a history book. Do you know what I wish they had? I hope that they end up making one of those blankets that has all the like photos one next to another, and then like you use those. That would be cute.
Yeah, that would be cute. So then after that, you have a little side interview with Jin, and he is asked like, well, what is it like to perform in a stadium versus where you've performed before? And he talks about how it is a bit harder for them, and they get more exhausted, and how he's just really tired the day after, but that also they get more energy from a larger crowd, which is actually something they've discussed before in like other content, and just saying how they feel like they have to go harder at bigger venues to match the scale, but also that they get more energy from the amount of people there.
Yeah, you know, I actually like when I watched this, I kind of it came across very positively. It came across as I prefer to perform at bigger stadiums, because performing at bigger stadiums gives this energy, and then the next day I want to pass out and the way I took it was kind of, you know, when you're in a room with 10 people, you kind of get energy from each one of those people. When you're in a massive stadium, every single energy from the individuals in that area is coming towards you. You're absorbing it, and in the moment it's electrifying, but then having to recover at the next day, not just physically but mentally and emotionally, after having so much energy come towards you. That's kind of how
you make a good metaphor, that in the moment it's electrifying, like a lightning strike going through you, but in the aftermath you need to recover.
Exactly, like mentally recover. And it's the same for a lot of people, that when you go to a social event of like 40 people, you come home and you're like, oh my god, okay, I need a day alone now just to chill. Can you imagine that, but on like 20,000 times the scale? And they do that most nights. So in the sense, like in the moment it's better, and it's it's more enjoyable to perform at bigger venues, but the recovery is also harder afterwards. And I feel like they reached a point here as well when it was kind of like, we know that the more beautiful, the more painful, but we've chosen to take it anyway. So the bigger stadiums are actually what I would choose to do and what I enjoy doing, because even if the next day I feel like passing out from exhaustion, it's worth it.
Yeah. So then we move on to Jimin, and he is asked if BTS have accomplished their goals, their dreams. And he says that it's too early to say that they've completed their journey, and that all the members would agree with him. That even if it's tough and exhausting, nobody could say like, oh, well, that's good enough, because they have way more ambition and they want to keep going. And then right after that is actually a scene with BTS discussing how they would improve their performances, potentially for Speak Yourself, because they start joking around about JK changing up his performance for Euphoria and going out to the extended stage. And it kind of seems to be like the ghost of what the Speak Yourself performance became.
Yeah. And going back to Jimin quickly, like how he says that's good enough, and how they wouldn't be able to say that, and how none of them are going to be able to think that. How could you say that's good enough? And you really get an insight into their brains there. And that must be so hard as well, because imagine your body and your mind just never being able to give it up. And I'm sure that there have been many times when they've wished that they weren't like that, because it would be easier.
I think also, like, we always joke, or not joke, take it seriously, but still, that BTS paved the way. And the thing about that sentence is that until this moment, until the Dome tour in Japan and in Asia, they achieved stuff other groups didn't, or other Asian acts didn't, but they still walked a certain road. And from that moment on, there was no longer a road to follow. Like, no one else did Wembley, no one else did Rose Bowl, like no other Asian act did stuff like that. From this moment on, there's no longer a road to follow. And the fact that they have to now find their own way, and Namjoon also said in the beginning that they were like 7 people on a boat looking at different directions, but going the same way.
Yeah, well,
and
I think that's
exactly it. Like, now everything is open to them. They can technically each go their own way, but they choose to go together through it and see what else they can find, what else they can achieve, what else is on their way.
You know how I see it? I see it as they are now climbing a mountain in the dark. And they have no idea what they're doing. All they know is that they're continuing to climb, and it's hard, and it's strenuous, and it's scary, and they don't know if they're going to hit a wall, if they're going to fall off a cliff. They don't know. They're just continuing to climb because that's all they know how to do.
Now, if you don't know me, then you won't know, but I'm a literature student, so I have to bring this in here. Has either of you heard or read the poem "The Road Less Traveled" by Robert Frost?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's you should read it. If you haven't read it, go and find it. It reminds me of this, and it's basically saying that the road less traveled is the one that there's no footsteps on, nobody has walked down before, and there's also a path that is clear and you can make your way through easily, and there's signs of many people going there. Now, that poem always makes me think of BTS, because they took the road less traveled, and it's a beautiful poem. And yes,
me too. It's like the definition of BTS from the beginning. The road less traveled.
Yes.
Okay, I will have to check it out. One of you link it to me.
Okay.
Before we move on, can we just laugh about the fact that Jin was like, "Hey, why don't you lift up your shirt?"
Yeah. Okay, so then the next scene is a scene of Hobie expressing how exhausted he is as they're leaving the concert, and in the distance you can hear Jin and Tae just singing really loudly. And he gets asked the question, what would they have done if they hadn't become singers? And he just kind of deflects the question, and he just says, hey, look, Jin and Tae are singing even after the concert, which to me is implying that it's just too natural for them to have done anything else. Like, it's just who they are. They can't stop.
Yeah. No, I'm not sure if they asked the question or not. I don't think it was shown if they did, but I think Kobe said kind of like, what would we have done if we weren't singers? Because listen, they're literally singing out.
They actually, this is their interview technique. Whatever the question is, they repeat the question and then answer it, so that when it comes to editing, they don't have to show the question. They just can show from the person responding onward. I saw it in one of their like one of their Bang 10 bombs or something. That's just how they do it.
Yeah, but you can hear the interviewer laugh at this point.
Yeah.
I love it when you get that, when you get the camera director just laughing to themselves.
I think it's really fun. Like, they get that question all the time. Like, what would you do if you weren't in BTS? And they all started so young that their answers are like, hobby playing tennis. Like, he did that when he was like 12.
Yeah, a few times.
Or Jimin's like, policeman. I'm like, okay, that sounds like your dream when you were 9, and that's probably what they're basing it off of.
Yeah. Jungkook, pro gamer. Like, it's not.
Although I do think JK could have.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the next scene is them in the car, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we have them in the car now. And, you know, something that I've picked up on is it seems like after their shows, their car journeys to their hotel rooms are where they share their music with each other. I've seen them mention it a few times now, that they showed, you showed me that in the car, or I played it for you in the car. And I actually love that, if it is true, if they just like use that time and that journey in the car to like share their music with one another. I love that. But I also really like the placement of it in this episode, of just calming the whole thing down, looking out at the scenery around her, outside, and just having them listening to this music. Plus, I Need That Song. I listened to it like 2 times on repeat. I loved how he was harmonizing with himself, and he obviously loved the song. And I loved that moment of just calm, and this is my art, please hear it, and I'll hear it with you and sing along to it.
So I have a different perspective on that. I see it as, and they've talked about it before and how they used to struggle with it more, but it's that when you're on stage, you're in a different world. You're surrounded by tens of thousands of people who are trying to communicate their love, their adoration, their need for you, and you are reflecting that back at them. And it's this massive love fest with music, bright lights, just an explosion of emotion for everyone involved. And in that moment, they are just 7 gods on stage. And then they get off stage, and it's kind of like the contrast between reality and who they were allowed to be, the fantasy they were allowed to live for the 3.5 hours on stage, is so sharp of a drop that it's hard for them to mentally digest it and handle it. And I know in previous docuseries, Jimin talked about how he used to have a lot more trouble with that. And I think Tae mentioned it as well in Bring the Soul. So I think one of the ways they handle it when they have to go back to the hotel is, I know some of them call their parents. Some of them, it seems to me, like Tae, play their music. They want to continue sharing the art and living in their art. So this was him saying, I'm going to share more of my music, and I'm going to keep singing because I can't stop. I'm communing with my art. Even if I no longer have ARMY next to me, I still have my art, and I need to keep doing it.
I totally agree with you. And that's what I mean by, like, I love that they use this time, the car ride from the concert to their hotel, to continue sharing their music with one another. Yeah.
I also love how I think it was JK with him. And Jungkook stayed there, and Jungkook said, "You should write songs," and he said, "I can't write songs." A year later.
But you know what, thinking about that, like, from that point, I'm pretty sure it was around that time when Tay kept saying, like, I can never finish a song. I can only write the first verse and the chorus, and then I can never finish it. And you know how proud I am watching that now, after he has released so many beautiful songs and has been constantly telling us that he's in the studio every single day and he's writing, and that is just so great. And you know what tells you, like, don't ever doubt yourself, because even if you say I can't write songs, a year down the line you will be releasing beauties like Sweet Note. Okay, maybe not, but don't give up.
It's really beautiful to see, like, that arc as a songwriter, to see him, like, from not believing in himself to slowly building the confidence, slowly starting to work on it, taking it seriously, and now that passion and excitement that he has, that he can't wait to share it with us, and constantly mentions it in V Lives and on YouTube, like, all the time. It's so sweet.
Getting a mixtape.
Yay. So that actually is a good segue into the next scene that happens, because So then we get to Jin. It's a scene of Jin in the hotel. He's getting ready for bed. He jokes about being lazy and how like he makes his own life harder by not doing things like untangling his hairdryer cord to make it longer. And then he like plays jokes with the cameraman by being like, oh, I'm gonna have some nighttime reading, and then he only reads one page of his book. But then like there's a cutaway to his interview where he explains that he's never been satisfied with his talent, and so he's worked hard to improve it and wants to continue being the best, because there's like, that's how he sees himself being successful. Like, you can only attain success if you keep working to improve.
You know, the thing that I loved the most about this sequence is him not unplugging the hairdryer and reading one book and then being like, that's productive, is his persona. And he is putting it on to be funny and to make people laugh, and because like that's his role, and it's cute. But I'm not buying it, Jin, because then we go into the scene of him, well, it's not straight away, but it comes of him in bed in the dark speaking his Japanese lines, and it's like it just proves it that Jin makes all these jokes and we love him for it, but he works so hard all the time behind the scenes. And it's him that said the quote before of, only you need to know how hard you work.
Literally was just thinking of that. Yeah, he doesn't like other people to see him working. He just wants them to see the finished result.
And he wants them to see his humor.
Yeah, he just wants people to make people happy.
Yeah.
And he always says, when they're happy, I'm happy. And that's all I want to show. All I want to show is my happy side, my vibrant side. He doesn't want anyone to see his, hopefully not anyone, but he doesn't want us as ARMY to see his hard work.
Yeah. I wonder if he worries that if we see him struggle, it will make us sad, and he doesn't like that.
I agree. I think that he is very much the type of person, and honestly, I don't understand this. I love it from him, but it's so not me. As long as somebody's happy when they're seeing me, then that's as happy as I can possibly be. Because Jen is very much the type of person that he just wants to see those that he cares about smiling, and it's a beautiful way of expressing his love. And that's the way of him expressing his love, is by saying, you know, I know how hard I work backstage, but I know it will make you laugh if I don't untangle this hairdryer and then joke about it.
Yeah. So then moving on, we get that interview with Namjoon that Omer mentioned before, where he reiterates that BTS are 7 men on one boat, but heading in one direction, but they're all looking at different directions themselves. And he emphasizes that this isn't a bad thing. It's natural. Even his parents do that. And then he gets asked, why do they stay together? And he says it's because they may be good at different things and they may want to do different things, but they have the same goals in mind. And they formed their brotherhood when they didn't know any better, that they essentially went into their future blind, and that was probably for the best, because if they had known how hard it would be, maybe they wouldn't have done it. And he just thinks it's funny that in the past, like when they had debuted, when somebody would complain about whatever, his default response was, that's too bad, we have to keep going. Which to me was just a really sweet look into like that mindset they had at that time. And then just shows me like how much strength of character he has. I really relate to that, by the way. The like, yeah, it sucks, whatever, keep going.
Yeah, me too. I hate like people that complain but do nothing about it. Like they just to complain, like just do it.
Well, you know, I disagree with you on that one, because mental health is a thing.
No, of course.
I know you didn't mean it like that.
I mean that.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about this boat metaphor, and we've had it a few times now, and you know, I want to add something to this boat metaphor that Namjoon hasn't said before. And I think the main thing to take away from being on a boat with people all looking in different directions is you are protected from every angle. You can see all around you. There is no room for error, because every blind spot that you might have, your partner can see it. And I think that the boat metaphor to describe them is so perfect. And you know, I'd probably add that sometimes they add little lifeboats on the side that go off for a little bit and then find their way back to the boat, because they like to do their own thing sometimes. But that's that's the best possible way to be. If you're trying to force everybody to look forward, then an iceberg might come from the side and, oh, Titanic Part 2. Sink.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, that's a very good extension of the metaphor. I love it.
I think also like in physics, when you have the center of mass, if you're pulled in different direction, it actually, you're much more stabilized. And I think this is also like the case here. Like they each pull to the stuff they like. They want to introduce stuff that they love, but in the end, the final product is a much more whole and much more complete that way. And also, I think like the whole mentality of I don't know if it came, like I'm assuming it came from Bang, that allowing the artists to explore stuff outside the group, because we've like BTS is not the first group to be a bunch of people brought together. We had like, there are others in K-pop obviously, and there's others all over the world. Like the Backstreet Boys were like this, the Spice Girls were like this, and they always got torn apart because people, well, the Backstreet Boys didn't, but like people always want to explore their own talents, new avenues, like try new stuff with new people, and there are always so much restrictions on that. And here, like they are allowed to take lifeboats from time to time and examine stuff outside of the group. So it's okay that they're looking in different directions because they still have the whole group in mind.
And at the end of the day, the boat still moves forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I think the next part was Yoongi, and he was like producing in his room, and this was one of my favorite moments of the episode, because so he talks about how he doesn't really get as excited anymore when they achieve goals or when they achieve dreams. Like back in the day, every time that they would achieve a dream, it would be so exciting for them. But now it's not really the same, and it's kind of, well, he says, I ask, or I think, am I not as happy as I used to be? But then he concludes that I've just become calmer. And, you know, this really reflects their perspective change as well, because before it was very much like you keep fighting, you keep falling, you keep getting up. And then when you receive something, it's great. And this whole passage really reminded me of him saying in one of his V Lives recently, it was on Cool FM, and somebody asked him the question, how do I live passionately? And he said, well, do we have to live passionately? Like, if you are happy in the moment, and if you are happy with the smaller things, then do we have to live passionately? And again, I feel like that reflects their mindsets, because when you're constantly living in passion, then you get really excited by wins, but you get devastated by defeats. And nowadays it's more, you appreciate it, but on a different way. You appreciate it as normality and as something that if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I'll be happy.
Yeah, and he specifically says that there is nothing about his job as a songwriter, producer, singer that disappoints him. He's happy. And also the other thing that I feel like the reason they included this here after the previous scene with Namjoon is because he says that like they've been doing so many different side projects, and he calls them all like unexpected and interesting. But he thinks that like even if all of this extra stuff is a lot of work, like the movie that they had released recently at that point, which was like the first Burn the Stage documentary movie, that he thinks all of those things lead them forward and make their work more meaningful. And so like when we were talking just now about how everybody might hop on their little lifeboat and do a side project, they bring back their experience from doing that side project back to the main ship and make their own, you know, group career that much more interesting and meaningful.
You know, adding to this, maybe they go off, visit islands, get some supplies, bring them all back to the ship.
Yeah, there you go. This metaphor is perfect.
I know, it's great. So
I want to add, like he talked about how when you if you write a song just to get the number one on the charts, it becomes meaningless because they're truly artists. They don't do it. And I think that's usually a privilege for already established artists, that they can have that mentality. They can afford not to be successful, not to be on the charts, like because they'll automatically be on the charts even if they're not, because they already have a fan base. But BTS really did that from the beginning. They didn't write songs to be number one on the charts. you could see from the beginning they always chose to do stuff that they believe in, that they can wholeheartedly perform and showcase and be behind their lyrics and behind their music and stand behind that. And
it stands them out from the crew as well, because like he specifically says, now that we're successful singers, I'll use this song to top the charts. Like if you were to approach it like that, then it would be meaningless. But exactly. There are so many artists these days who, once they become bigger, their music changes and they begin making gimmicky songs that will reach number one.
Something that I thought was really interesting is that they pretty much took this whole episode to summarize their Japan Dome tour and how they went all across Japan, even though their concerts in the rest of Asia were interspersed in between there. So like they went to Tokyo and Osaka first, and then they flew to Taiwan and had 2 concerts there. And then they flew back to Nagoya in Japan, and then after that they went to Singapore, and then back to Japan in Fukuoka, and that's where they ended their tour. And then they went on to go to like Hong Kong and Bangkok. But I think cinematography wise, they just wanted to summarize that entire experience and how BTS felt in Japan. And I thought that was just really cool, because it helps you as the viewer who might not appreciate them as Korean artists in Japan. It was kind of like a nice moment to appreciate them for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then like the next part that comes is Tae, that I wanted to talk about, is like Tae talking about how it's so hard for him to believe how popular and how incredible their fans are, and that it just doesn't seem real until the lift brings them up to the stage, and then how incredibly motivating it is to see the crowd of fans waiting for them.
And he said this before, actually. I'm pretty sure it was Tae. That said about what's your favorite part of a concert, and he answered that it was when the lift goes up and he sees that everybody's there. And you see this again here, and honestly, it makes so much sense. I think that would be my favorite moment too, because it would never feel real until you went up, and that first look of it would be the most beautiful, wouldn't it? And it shows as well that ARMYs are their motivation, and the most beautiful moment for them is coming up. Well, for Tae at least, is coming up and seeing it, because with no audience, there's no performance.
I think it's the same for ARMYs. The first moment they rise to the stage, especially during Love Yourself, when they rose up to Idol, it was just unreal. All of a sudden, they're there, they're live, and they look so powerful and incredible.
Yeah.
And then I also just wanted to point out how they have this interview with Jin, and he explains that the reason that they don't have conflicting opinions or worry about people leaving the group is that they all have the same 3 loves. They love the stage, the music, and their fans. And they just want to perform and make music together for a really long time.
Yeah, so I actually just wanted to read that quote quickly, because I teared up when this came on. So Jin says, "I think we'll be able to make good music and give good performances for a long time." And it really got to me, because like we were talking about earlier, with most idol groups, their limit is 7 years. They do this and then they go into the military, and then they come out and they do different things that are separate, that are like on variety shows, acting, things like that. And the fact that they reached a place in this moment in 2018 when they were on this tour of saying, you know what, I think we'll be able to do this for a long time. And that just made me like really emotional.
Well, especially because they just re-signed their contract for another 7 years. So this is them coming off of that with their renewed determination. Like, we want to keep going.
Yeah. I think that signing the contract was really a turning point mentally, because they didn't just sign it automatically. They stopped and thought exactly about what they wanted from those next 7 years. What were their terms? Where are they going? What are their plans? They stopped. They did a trip together, the 7 of them, to Thailand, and they all got food poisoning. And they stopped and thought about where they're going. And I think that whole like energy you get from making a decision and actually liking the decision you made, and knowing that everyone around you feels the same, and you're going together, you're going the same way. It's very powerful.
And they actually talk about that. There's like a scene with JK where he says that they spent a lot of time reminiscing on everything that they had accomplished in 2018, and that they took time to reevaluate what their goals were, their purpose, everything.
Yes.
And he talks about how it was partially because the success they had in 2018, they didn't expect it. And how that kind of success and that kind of like skyrocketing, that they just, just got so huge in 2018 that it made him also kind of worried about like, well, 2019, I wonder what that's going to hold for us, and he's like, I wonder like that, like, it's also like both success in terms of success and concerns.
This sequencing was very interesting because we had that moment from Jin, and then it goes on to, we have JK here, and then we have Yoongi after him, who says about there being a lot of doubt about doing this, and that the job demands that you're constantly on a roller coaster ride, and they spent the year reflecting on themselves, and this is when Hobie says it was the year I accomplished my dreams. And when it comes to this year, I think re-signing their contracts and having that break, as you said, allowed them a chance to reevaluate and think, right, this isn't going to be sustainable the way that it is right now, because we've been doing this while we've been very young, while we've been focusing on a certain way of performing and living and things like this. And I feel like taking that time to reevaluate what they were doing, why they were doing it, and how much they could put into it, how much they wanted to put into this. And they've said before that their new contracts allowed a very different way of going forward. And you can see it even more so, I guess, as you move forward. But I think that time to reassess and make a plan for the future, because it could have gone one of two ways. It could have been like, okay, no, this has been too much up until this point, and it seems like it's only getting more and more and more, so I can't. But they went about it so maturely in a way that would be okay.
I'm gonna I don't know if I should talk about this here or later. Maybe I'll wait until later when we get to the like snippet of their mama speech. But I did want to say that so their renewed contracts are completely private. It's an agreement between them and Big Hit. So we will only find out with time what the new terms of their contracts are. As is correct. It's their contract. It's, their privacy. But I really believe that they took time to change the terms to make it sustainable for them as they get older. Like we've seen them have injuries all the time. We've seen in past docuseries that like they have chronic problems that just get worse with time. And as these incredibly talented and like active performers, they're like athletes, like they're breaking down their body over time. I don't think another 7 years of nonstop concerts is unfortunately realistic. I think that my theory is that long term we will see changes in how they go about their schedules. And I think we've also already seen that in terms of like all the IP that Big Hit invested in, which is like stuff where fans get to interact and be with BTS, but not in a way that puts strain on BTS.
I think also, like, if we're talking about contracts, I also think they're not just planning this next 7 years. I think BTS, they like being around one another, and they like creating together. And I think whatever they're planning is not necessarily just for the next 7 years. It's long term. And even in these 7 years, like, there's going to be relationships, there's going to be military, there's going to be so much stuff that changes the dynamic between the group and how the group functions. And these new contracts, they allow for all of that and allow them to still grow as artists, but under new terms that actually fit the way the world works, as opposed to when you're a teenager and you don't have so many obligations.
My theory with this is very much, from their perspective, if we continue this way, then it's going to break. How do we go about making it bend? And I feel like that's kind of the approach that it's come about. And it's going to be great, in my opinion, because they will be able to steer this in the ways that they want to steer it. And they have enough trust and faith in one another that they can do that together.
And that's actually what Hobie says, like a little bit later in the episode, where he gets asked, like, what is the key to companionship? And he says the key is trust. And because the 7 of them have spent so much time together, their trust has helped them a lot, and they wouldn't have come as far if they didn't trust and respect and support one another the way they do. Namjoon also mentions that because like he comes before Hobie in the episode, and he gets asked like what is the change between when you debuted and now, and he talks about how like when they debuted and entered the industry, that was like a moment of realization for them, or disillusionment, that everything was not as it seemed, that the dream that they had was more difficult, and that was also when they learned that their team was really special compared to other idols.
He said like that they used to fight a lot in the beginning when they were trainees, and then they got to the real world and saw how different they were from everyone else, and how much temptation there was outside that, and how unique their group became because of all these fights and how they handled it.
But also because their fights helped define their relationships, because they hashed out all their differences. It wasn't a like polite professional relationship anymore. It was a lot closer. It was a lot of realizing over and over again through each fight that, hey, we have disagreements, we have conflicts, whatever. There are still things about you that I like, and I still want to be here, and I still want to try and meet our dream.
Yeah, I still want to make it work.
Yeah. There's nothing worse about bottling up your resentment towards somebody, because if you don't let it out, then that one day it's just too much, and then you lose all faith and trust and respect for one another. And Hobie talks later about how they respect one another, and that's the key point in the matter. But backtracking down quickly, I wanted to talk a bit about how one of the things in this series that I've really loved is that they will show you a scene of something, and then the interview afterwards will reflect their opinion on the scene. And then you kind of think, now I understand the scene. So we had them giving advice on the performance, on like what they were doing wrong, what they needed to change, blah, 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 blah. And they just took it as a very casual conversation. It was like, oh, really? And then they joked around about it, and they were like, okay, cool, I won't do that anymore. And then we had Yoongi talking about, it was Yoongi, not Hobie, who talked about respect, of course. So Yoongi says, we can now overlook each other's weaknesses, and like, we don't have conflicts because, and it's just so cool how they do that, of showing this interaction of them giving each other advice, constructive criticism, taking it on the chin, not letting it affect them. And then Yoongi saying, like, it's not an issue anymore because we respect one another. And
you know what else he said? He said that they were closer than family, which made my heart melt, because we all know this. To be an ARMY is to appreciate their relationships with one another. And I just felt so validated and touched that he, spoke it out loud, that they are that close.
Yeah. But I found it like, I love that sentence and that the way he said it. But like, for me personally, the people I have the hardest time forgiving for their weaknesses are my family. Like, I always hold my family to a higher standard. And so when they show me their weaknesses, like, I get upset by it. Not if they're like sad, if they're like, I don't know, half-assing something or something like that.
I guess that's why he says that we're closer.
They're closer than that.
Well, but also they all reiterate time and time again that the reason they're still together is because they all have the same goal. So unlike your family, like you don't have the same goal as your family. Like, your family is your family. You all just exist. They are a team who have a purpose, a dream. They are intent on getting somewhere. And so even if they have disagreements, it's just different perspectives of trying to accomplish the same thing. So I think that helps them overcome the disagreements.
Yeah, plus that was like when I was like in my early 20s and I grew up and I understand how my parents are humans, and
And I think as well,
it's easier.
I think it's different as well, because around family, for most of us, we still have to put on like a face most of the time. We have a certain way of being around a lot of family members of, oh, this is my persona around my family. Whereas with them, they are around each other all the time, and they were when they were younger. So there was no escaping from each other. The arguments and the resentment would come out. They would argue with each other, and eventually it's kind of like, well, I've already argued with you about this, so it's kind of moving on now. Whereas it's not so much like that with family. You're just kind of like, every time you see them and then you leave, you're like, oh, they always do that, and then you remember it in your head, but you don't actually like get through it.
Yeah.
Something that I really liked is how, while they're all sitting around at that table, like the 6 of them eating and giving each other like casual feedback, there's like this part where one of them's just like, oh, where's JK, and they pan and like the scene changes and it's like in the hallway, like just muttering like, chicken, where's the chicken? And I don't understand why he's like whispering about it and it's like being all sneaky in the hallway. It's just so cute.
You know, this is one of the moments when you really see his personality come through, because he's so excitable sometimes and so just adorable about the smallest little things. And it was so funny that they were all having this like serious conversation around the table, and then all of a sudden he's got his self cam and he's just like, right, we're going on a mission to find chicken.
Yeah, and then he dropped his pickled radish. He's like, oh no, my pickled radish.
Oh, that was the best bit. So honestly, I loved how like when he goes back to his room, first of all, it's really nice that like he can just go off and like be by himself. But I loved that he had his camera and he was always talking to it while being by himself, introvert life. But the thing I loved about it was that he was sat there listening to old school BTS.
Yeah,
that's so cute. He was just listening to old BTS and he was like singing along, and then he was giving us like background information on these songs. And
like reminiscing about rapper JK and his lack of talent in rapping. He said he wasn't much of a rapper back then. What?
Nice.
Bring back rapper JK.
So honestly, like this was one of my favorite moments from the episode, and this is when I started tearing up again because I'm a crybaby. But so he was talking about how basically like he wonders when he's an old man who will still be there. And he wants to be able to talk with armies and ask them how it was back then and how they were, how they performed. And it honestly like broke my heart in 2 ways, because first of all, like this is something that JK has said a few times. Like in the past, I remember him saying that he wants to be somebody that is remembered. And I think this is probably one of his big fears of when it ends, when people are going to leave, when he's not going to have this anymore and it's not going to be so thrilling. And honestly, like we can't tell the future, and we don't know if there will be as big of a fan base as there is today. ARMY isn't full of people who love them devotedly. There are people around that are shitty, and like as there is with most fandoms. But if I know anything for sure, I know me and I know the people around me, and I know that this is a part of who I am now. Like I know that I'll still be there, and that knowledge makes me want to reassure him so much that like if you could feel my love, then you wouldn't worry about that. You wouldn't have the doubts, even if it might not be as many. And
so I saw it like that, and I also saw it in a different perspective, because if you think about it, the only 7 people in the world who cannot experience BTS are BTS. That incredible connection, that discovery, that journey that we all take when we're baby ARMY and fall down that rabbit hole and just discover a different universe of love and acceptance and joy. They can't have that because they are the other side of it. So it's, you know, the pros and cons. The cons is that they can't ever be ARMY or experience it from ARMY side, but the pro is that they are BTS.
And they can't be objective to it. Like, they have to be critical of their work. They can't. Plus, they will never have that perspective of somebody like us. We could say, you were great, you were amazing, you made me feel this way, you looked like this on stage. Like, they can never be able to know that.
They can never understand the veracity of what we say.
Yeah.
I think also, like, we say it, but still our connection with them, as much as it's open and they read our stuff, they read our tweets, sometimes it's not a conversation. And I think that's what he really wants. I think he really wants to sit down with some ARMY and listen to what it was like back then to be a fan of BTS.
Well, you know, Yami has had a great idea to this, so why don't you take it away, Yami, and tell JK what he needs to do to understand his perspective.
Jungkook, every member of BTS, honey, ARMYverse is here for you. Come to our house. Come spend some time with us. We will tell you what we think. We have a bunch of armies here, either us on screen or on audio or those in the live chat in the comments. This is us just hanging out and celebrating you. We will tell you the truth. Just come to our house.
You know, we've described this between the three of us before, that we want our channel to be a love letter to BTS. So I hope one day they get to open it and they get to see the immortalized version of the love and the passion that we feel for them. If they want to know how ARMYs felt, how BTS were, then it's here forever.
I promise I make amazing lamb skewers. Like, I will cook. I'll make all your favorites.
Okay, this is the thing I wanted to talk about before. This is where, in his aside, Yoongi talks about how, because they respect each other so much, if someone ever said they couldn't continue because of personal reasons, that the team would try to work it out with that person and overcome whatever difficulty was preventing them. But that in the end, if they couldn't, then the rest of the guys would say that they understand. It is your life. We respect that. And only a little bit later is where they transition into the clip from their Mama 2018 acceptance speech for Artist of the Year in Hong Kong, where they had a very emotional acceptance speech, lots of crying, ARMYs watching at home crying, ARMYs in the stands crying, everyone emotionally devastated, because that's where Jin dropped the bomb that in early 2018 they had considered disbanding. And that's where he says that he's grateful to the members for overcoming their difficulties and finding a way to move forward. And this, to me, is the hint that that's what happened, that there were members in BTS, one or more, that didn't think they could go on.
I agree. Yeah. I completely agree. And I think, honestly, like, we also had at the beginning, remember we spoke about this, Jimin saying, and now I feel like none of us would want to give up. Because there's this reassurance now, after going through all the difficulties and coming to the same conclusions and bonding over this, of they all have the same goal and they all feel the same ways about those three things that we discussed earlier, that they all love. And
the stage, the music, and their fans.
The fans, yeah. And it was very much, I totally agree with you. I think that's exactly what happened. Is there were a few members that were like, you know, I can't do this anymore. This isn't what I want to do anymore. But then working through it as a team and reaching the goal. And, you know, that's why I feel so happy. And I think it just shows. It shows recently in their demeanors, in their perspectives, in their outlooks on everything, and just in their body language and everything, that they're just so much more at peace with what they're doing. And that's why I say it all the time, this moment this year was just the moment when it could have gone one way or the other.
I think they probably spent all of 2018 until they re-signed in, what was it, October 2018, hashing out the terms of their contract and trying to get to a place where they would stay together.
Yes.
I think October was like when it was announced, but I think it was done before Festa. Because Festa 2018 was like, the Mama speech really gives Festa 2018 a whole new look. Like when you hear them talk about the trip they took and how it changed and how they grew from it. I think it was before Festa 2018.
At least, you know, I have
like the big stuff were done.
I don't want to speculate too much because this is something we're never going to know. But we all saw, and this is just one of the people, but we all saw like how Tae reacted to that speech.
So the fact that you bring up Tae and how emotional he got during Jin's part of their acceptance speech is actually very interesting, because the scene that follows their speech is Tae being interviewed and him saying that seeing the faces of ARMY gives them strength to perform, and how important ARMY is to them, and that even when things are tough, seeing ARMY is how they decide that they can endure it.
And like, this isn't so much of a spoiler, I wouldn't say, but you see it. You see the difference in Tae since that time, and how happy he is now in comparison. And it's so beautiful, and it makes me so happy. And I will read this quote out because I did write it down, not the whole thing, but he says, seeing them there and seeing their sincere expressions of love on their faces when things get hard, seeing their faces gives us more strength. And yeah, it's just full circle, isn't it? Of this
Isn't
mama
it
speech
crazy?
and then
Yeah. Because I can't imagine BTS without any single member.
Yeah.
BTS is 7. They all have to be there.
Yeah.
And if we feel like this on the outside, imagine how it is for them.
Exactly. They can't cope one day if one of the members aren't with them, like on holiday or...
Yeah, thinking of Malta, the whole time they couldn't stop talking about how they were missing one member or than the other.
Yes. And honestly, like, I do believe that if one member left, that would be it. Like, I don't think they would stay as a 6-member group. There's no way. And that's why they are such a unit and why they work so well together, because it is about every single element making a circle, and every, like, the other 6's happiness is just as important as my happiness, because if one of these elements of my whole burns out, then I burn out. And I feel like that's why they're so connected and why they're so in tune with one another, because it's not just, oh, well, that's that person's happiness, that's that person's life, it's more, well, that's part of me, and if that goes, I go.
I think also, like, you saw it in Bon Voyage as well, in Bon Voyage, the latest Bon Voyage, like that they did it right after the vacation they all took, where they were a month apart.
Yes.
And Hobie says, like, I miss them. Like, I saw some of them, but I miss them. And they all missed each other so much in that month apart. And Jim was like, it's like my cell phone. My cell phone was broken, and now I have it again.
Yeah, and Jimin says the same thing when they're spending like one night in it, and he just tells them, he's like, I missed all of you. This is where I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with you guys, not even with my own family or other friends.
Yeah, I went with my family, I traveled, I did this, I went with friends to Jeju, like I did all this stuff, but I missed you.
And they would never have realized that. They might have, but it puts it right into perspective when you have that time to be away from it. And I think this is probably going to be part of their contract as well, is to take breaks so that to take maybe time to be together apart from work and things like that.
You know what? That's actually a good point, because in their first docuseries, Burn the Stage, they talked about how it was never ending. And even in, was that the one where it was like December and somebody was like, is it Christmas? And Yoongi's just like, who cares? We still have to work.
Yeah.
So like that was just them. I think partially it was them being very ambitious, and they just themselves couldn't stop performing and reaching for the next goal. But I think they
thought it was, this is it, this is the top, this is as far as we can get it, so
they thought it was the home stretch, and that they were like, we can just push a little harder and get a little higher. And then they realized at the end of that tour how much of a toll it took on them. And they were like, if this is the pace we have to go at to sustain this kind of success and fame and popularity, I don't know if we can do that. And
you have even seen it, like in the last year or so, how much they're doing things by themselves and doing their personal hobbies, and how much they talk about, oh, we always get together and just talk to each other nowadays. Like, it's not about work. It's us just, oh, we're so funny when we're together because we have this time. And this is the thing now, when you reach a certain point, when you achieve your dreams and there's nothing really to keep going, then your focus becomes on your happiness every day. And their happiness includes making music and includes being together, which means that it can still be a part of it, but it doesn't have to be so like...
Yes, I agree with everything you said. I just wanted to add, you know what else brings them happiness? Being with ARMY. And that's why in the circumstances with this pandemic that we're in now, where they can't be with ARMY, they can't do concerts or fan meets or comeback shows, they have found a different way to be with ARMY through the internet. And you can see that it makes them better. It makes them feel better.
Yes, they find healing through connecting with ARMYs. And it's the same thing, isn't it? Like, they've had to have a break from us. They've had a forced break from us. And how often do they talk about how much they miss ARMYs?
Yeah.
Like, it's a new appreciation for ARMYs. And now we have Yoongi coming on to do his radio show because it gives him healing. We have Tae playing games with ARMYs because he finds joy from it and it helps him. And
I want to add, you said that like now that they achieved far more than they ever thought, they can concentrate on their happiness and do stuff that make you happy, can make them happy. But it can also go the other way around. Like lack of dreams and lack of goals can cause you depression, can cause you to say like, what am I doing now? Where am I going? Like I've achieved far more than I ever thought I will. There's nothing left. Okay, there's a Grammy. Okay, but technically there's nothing much.
They surpassed the Grammy and went straight to rubbing shoulders with world leaders in Dear Class of 2020.
No, of course, yeah. That's exactly where I'm going with it. Like, it's not about goals anymore. It's also trivial now. Like these goals, they really embrace the love they have for their profession, and the love that they have for their friends, and
They've really focused on loving themselves.
Yeah, that was my lesson. They love themselves.
Can I slap you through the screen? There you go.
Hashtag love yourself.
Oh God.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you just see the difference now, and
you mentioned Dave, but also Jimin. Like Jimin, they mentioned so many times that he's so much happier now. Like even in the season's greetings that they did, right? And they gave each other awards. And Yoongi gave Jimin, and he said, "Because you're so funny now." And Yoongi has mentioned it like 5 times in the recent lives, how funny Jimin has become and how much lighter he is.
Well, same thing in Bon Voyage 4 when they're in New Zealand. Like he just kept cracking jokes and being silly, and you would never have expected that from him before, because he was just much more focused, I think, on coming across. I don't know, correctly.
Not embarrassing himself.
Looking good, like.
Yeah, speaking of Jimin, that's actually how the episode ends. Where
before we get there,
okay, fine.
They show a clip of all these images over time. I don't know exactly what they were. There were certain concert images. Maybe they were from like different like performances in Japan or something, but it goes from when they were a lot younger until like nowadays. So like it just showed that cycle right before the end, which was really nice.
Yeah, they show that as a montage, because that question that maybe Jimin got in the beginning of Companionship, he came back later and answered it. And he says that he talks about how different they are in personalities and all these little small ways, but that they stayed together through everything because they share the same end goal. And that's where you have that montage of them growing up together through the ages.
And again, props to the editing team on having this beginning question, I'm not really sure where to go with this, and then filling it with all the answers, and then coming to the end and just summing it up with one nice little statement. We share the same end goal, and that's it. That's the answer. Yeah, that's the end.
Love yourself answer.
Oh, shut up.
No, I mean, I really think that the content of the albums, the concepts that BTS made music and made albums out of, force them to think about those things and take time to determine their own answers for that.
Yes.
And so loving the Love Yourself era really allowed them to learn how to love themselves as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then when you look at like the Map of the Soul era, that's very much about looking at your journey and coming to peace with where you are now. And I've said this a few times, that I feel like it reflects why they're still doing this, and it's because they love their fans, they love their music, and they love performing. Like that's the main thing, and it really reflects their journey of realizing that, of at the beginning it being this very big persona, then them coming across this hurdle of feeling afraid and not knowing what to do with this, and then coming out on the end and being like, you know what, this is why, and this is what I'm doing. We share the same end goal.
And to be honest, somebody could say like, oh, well, that's not earth-shattering. That's very basic. Your fans performing music. And that's where Yoongi's scene becomes important, because he's like, that's fine. Like, I can appreciate who I am. My dream doesn't need to be this big thing. I am calm and happy. It doesn't need to be exciting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why must we live passionately?
I think also, why must we live passionately? I think the end goal has changed.
Yeah.
They share the same end goal, but it's not the same end goal that was in the beginning. It changed and shifted. And I think now it's their love. It's not just their love of performing and ARMY and music. It's their love of BTS, their love of each other, that companionship they have between them that they want to preserve. And you can preserve it with the trust that they have in one another and with that family, closer than family bond that they have. And I think that's part of the end goal just as much as all this other stuff.
What is it that they said isn't? I'm pretty sure it might have been Namjoon's live about the album. Didn't he say something like, if you want to know why we're still together, it's in this album?
Yep.
I feel like that's very much the same case of this episode. If you want to know why BTS is still together, watch this episode. And you know what? You won't get it first try. Because if you watch it, it's a documentary series with various scenes of them talking about things. When you look at it from start to finish of what the message is, what they're trying to say, and in context of their history and everything, and all the things we know about them, where they came from, where they seem to struggle, what their thoughts were on the matter. If we want to know why BTS is still together, the answers are all here in the album and in this episode.
And only people who care about them the way we do will
Yes.
get those answers, which I think is also beautifully done, because the information in this episode is there, especially the part where they included Jin's acceptance speech at Mama. But only if you're an actual ARMY, an actual fan, do you understand the context and all the bits and pieces that go behind it, and do you actually glean the true meaning that they're trying to give you.
And you know, the other thing is we are very well versed as ARMY from BTS and from Big Hit in being able to put all of these things together, to find connections, to understand the order of it, to see the significance in every moment and why it matters and how it connects. And they've put it together very much in that way. And you know, somebody who was on the outside might watch this and not get it at all. But does it matter if they don't?
It's not for them, it's for us.
Exactly.
This docuseries isn't on Netflix. It's on Weverse.
You raise a very good point, Omer.
You know, that's actually a very good point. I think they would make a much different series if it was on Netflix and the audience was intended to show their journey, because I don't think the average person could watch this and get the same thing out of it that we do.
No. This is made for ARMY.
What a brilliant way of giving us a message that nobody but us could get, while making it available to everyone. I just think they've cracked the code of how to communicate with ARMY.
Oh, definitely. And so I think on that note, that it's for ARMY, we should end this episode here. I hope you enjoyed discussing with us. I actually had a lot of fun doing this. I love being able to get through it. And you know, I think that after the discussion that we have, I have a much clearer understanding of it, because there's only so much you can do in your head. Now I've come out of this and I feel such overwhelming love and understanding of them and their journey and where they're at and why it matters than I did at the beginning of this discussion. So I hope that anybody watching feels the same way. And please do send us your thoughts on the matter as well if you want to get involved. Does anyone else have any ending thoughts before we leave?
I was going to say that I have a deeper appreciation for the bond between BTS and ARMY now.
Yeah.
I think I have a deeper appreciation for the bonds between BTS and BTS, like the members themselves. Like
all we feel is love here.
And I would like to end by saying BTS is ARMY, ARMY is BTS.